It is 6:05. I will go ahead and start the meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance before our guests speak. We can all turn. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So we have Claire and Julia here to speak to us a little bit about the 10 Mile River Collaborative.
Yes.
If you could, and you can just stand anywhere that you feel convenient. I feel like the speakers are going to pick you up for the recording.
Okay, we brought a bunch of maps for you.
Thank you.
We're big fans of maps.
So are we actually. Love our maps.
Here, I'll just. Here. So, Martha, who's taking the minutes?
I am technically, unless you want to.
So much I
can do it. I can take. Shannon's going to take the minutes. Thank you. I was looking for my recording button just so I could record it. But if you'll take the basics, that'd be great. Thank you.
There's 4 things here for you. There's plenty for everyone.
Alrighty.
You just take one, pass it down. That works for you.
Hey, Leslie. We have just technically started, but not really started.
Okay. Whatever. Wherever works for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm Claire. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. We're both from the Housatonic Valley Association. The Housatonic Valley Association is the watershed organization and land trust that protects the environmental health of the entire Housatonic River watershed in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and New York. I am the 10 Mile River watershed manager for HVA, which when I'm not trying to talk for too long, I say I'm the New York project manager because the 10 Mile River is the second largest tributary to the Housatonic River, and it's the only major one in New York State. So it's a really interesting piece of geography. You can start with that. It says clean, cold, and connected at the top.
Yeah, okay. The blue one. Oh.
So the packet kind of takes you through 10 Mile geography a little bit. The headwaters of the 10 Mile River start about 10 minutes north of Millerton in the town of Northeast at Boston Corners. And that's the headwaters of Weebatuck Creek, which flows south to join Wassaic Creek in Amenia. Most maps will tell you that the 10 Mile River main stem starts at the confluence of Weebatuck Creek and Wassaic Creek. And then the 10 Mile flows south pretty much parallel to the Taconic Ridge and the railroad and Route 22. It meets the Swamp River, which actually flows south to north in Pauling. And then the 10 Mile dips just over the border into Connecticut, where it joins the Housatonic at Bulls Bridge in Kent. And there's a very cool Appalachian Trail campsite that where the footbridge right over the confluence if you're looking for a good hike. It's very beautiful. Really cool. So a big part of what I do for HVA is I coordinate a group called the 10 Mile River Collaborative, which was formed in 2014 and is made up of representatives ideally from every municipality in the watershed. The municipalities that have the most land within the 10 Mile River are Northeast, Amenia, Dover, Pauling, and the town of Washington. The town of Washington actually has a third of its land. It's 29%, I figured out yesterday. Right. So a third of the town of Washington flows, all the water that lands in that third flows ultimately to the 10 Mile and then the Housatonic. So the 10 Mile River Collaborative, like I said, is made up from folks from each municipality Who that is totally depends on the town, and I can get more into that if you're interested. A lot of towns send CAC members. Sometimes towns have a town board member who's the liaison between the town board and the CAC, and that person will come. Town supervisors often come, but I try and be mindful of their time and energy and let them know ahead of time when something is worth their time. So those folks come to the collaborative meetings, which are quarterly, as well as someone from the DEC Fisheries local division, folks from Connecticut Deep, from our partner organizations, so Dutchess Land Conservancy, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Trout Unlimited, Friends of the Great Swamp, local business owners, farmers, and just generally interested individuals meet quarterly to speak as one voice for the 10 Mile River and collaborate on resource management strategies across town borders and across state lines, which is very cool, I think. It's a very active group, and they're often fun meetings. And that group came together to author the 10 Mile River Watershed Management Plan, which was made public in 2021. Watershed Management Plan is a technical document that outlines the existing conditions of the watershed. It goes into history, geography, geology, natural resources, all that good stuff. And it also describes projects that have been identified as priorities for watershed health by the collaborative. So that section, the future project section, we call the action plan. It's actually called implementation actions in the plan, but that's wordy. So it's the action plan. And that is split into two categories: construction and non-construction projects. Construction projects are projects that have a physical location. So rain gardens, stormwater retrofitting, culvert right sizing, riparian buffers, habitat restoration, stuff like that. Non-construction projects are programs like volunteer trash cleanups, youth outreach around watershed awareness. One program that I'll mention specifically because I hope to work with farmers in the town of Washington in the next year or so is our agricultural non-point source mitigation project. And I'll just define that in case you don't know. Non-point source pollution means exactly that. It's pollution that doesn't have a source. So it's not like a failing septic system or something gross coming from a pipe. It's pollution that's entering the water table at a landscape scale. So agricultural non-point source pollution is to do with farming practices. So like fertilization, livestock management, crop rotation, stuff like that.
And there's lots in the farm bill to support those.
Exactly.
Kind of practices. So
Yeah.
That's good.
So for exactly that reason, we've gotten a lot of funding to start that project around here. And in the construction projects section of the action plan, I brought a copy of the watershed management plan that I'll leave with you. It's very long. I wasn't going to get into that too much right now, but we have been doing a lot of work in and around Wellsbrook, which is a tributary to the 10 Mile River that is mostly in Dover, New York, but its headwaters are in the town of Washington. Mm-hmm. And its headwaters are mostly surrounded by agricultural properties. So one of our priority areas for starting that agricultural non-point source program is around the headwaters of Wellsbrook in Washington. So I'll be around this year. Just thought I'd mention that. But ultimately, the watershed management plan is intended to be a resource for towns who are seeking funding to complete the projects that are in the plan. All of the projects that are in the plan were put there by municipalities who wanted to take steps towards doing those projects, whatever they are. So the towns of Northeast Armenia and Dover have all passed resolutions to formally adopt the plan. And that just kind of puts their money where their mouth is, so to speak, when it comes to submitting grant applications. It demonstrates momentum on the project long before seeking funding. So if and when the town of Washington and you find folks have projects that you'd like to include in the plan, we would be extremely happy to talk through those projects, tell you a little more about the resources that HVA has to offer. At that point, I would probably suggest thinking about talking to the town board about adopting the plan and moving forward from there. So that's my introduction, and I'm happy to take questions now or later.
Thank you.
That's very good. So, when I obviously road salt is a big concern. Is there anything that towns could be doing or should be doing? That there's a paramount concern about safety and community expectations that the roads will be salted, and yet at the same time, it's bad for the watershed. So is that like a non-specific point source? Or
That would be a type of non-point source pollution, yeah.
And so is there anything that towns can be thinking about in that regard?
When it comes to alternatives to salt, that's not something that I know terribly much about. I might defer to Julia on that one. Specifically, in one project that we're actually just about to finish up in Dover, we put in some rain gardens along Wellsbrook, along the Route 22 corridor that will filter stormwater coming off Route 22 before entering Wellsbrook. And that's a type of green infrastructure project that we try and work with towns to do a lot of and like build into municipal projects wherever possible.
Is that one in particular, and maybe others, written into the plan for that purpose as stormwater management for salt?
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any monitoring of?
So the way that project came to be was during the process of writing the watershed plan, we did just general water quality sampling to get a sense of where there were like hot spots for pollution in the 10 Mile and its tributaries. And that particular intersection of Wellsbrook, where it flows underneath Route 22, it's also a commercial area. That's where the McDonald's and the CVS are. That's how we learned that there was unfiltered stormwater entering Wellsbrook. And so the rain gardens came to be the solution through a process of working with those property owners to see what they were willing to do and what was possible, and then working with getting funding first off to hire a native landscaper who does design and build of green infrastructure projects specifically. So yeah, it's really place specific. When it comes to like alternatives to road salt, like on a town scale, that's something that I would have to do more research about. But if you know that there are places where there's a stormwater problem, where there's flooding, then that would be something that we could talk about and potentially put in the plan for sure.
Very helpful.
So I'll turn it over to Julia, who has more maps to show you.
More maps. We really love maps. So I'm going to start with a big map. One of the tools that we use to think about water quality and ensuring the health and water quality of the watershed is land protection. And so HVA is also a land trust in addition to being a watershed organization. And obviously, you all probably know this, but I'll just say it to set the record straight. Reducing the amount of land that's converted to impervious surfaces is obviously hugely impactful for water quality, wildlife habitat, take your pick of conservation values. Maintaining forested lands and natural lands on our landscape is really important in the face of the climate crisis. So one of the tools that we use in the face of our watershed management is something that we call follow the forest. And this is this huge initiative that is all about protecting and connecting the forested landscapes. So the map that's mostly green is showing you the entire Follow the Forest corridor, which I like to say starts where the Appalachian Trail crosses the Hudson River on the Bear Mountain Bridge and extends north through the Housatonic watershed all the way to Canada. And those green spaces that are popping out at you are what we call core forests. They are large, contiguous interior blocks of forest over 250 acres in size. And the 10-mile watershed is a critical piece of the Follow the Forest corridor. The town of Washington, the 10-mile watershed are that connection between the Hudson Highlands and the Taconics to the north, and ultimately the Adirondacks and the Green Mountains. And so thinking strategically around land protection is something we do closely with the Dutchess Land Conservancy and Scenic Hudson and other conservation organizations working in this space. So if we take it to the more colorful map, that's perhaps a little bit more complicated, that zooms in on the town of Washington, what I'm showing you on this map are existing protected lands as shown by the New York Protected Areas database. The core forests are now color-coded in green and orange. And the idea is, in order to maintain biodiversity on our landscape and have climate resilience in the face of the climate crisis, we need to conserve at least 50% of each of these core forests. So those core forests that are shown in orange are below that 50% threshold, and those that are shown in green are at 50% or above. What you're also seeing on the map are purple circles, and these purple circles are something that we refer to as wildlife linkages, potential wildlife linkages. There's all sorts of really phenomenal connectivity science that looks at our landscape at this regional scale and draws essentially like these lines across the landscape showing potential areas for wildlife connectivity. But what we're all missing at that really large regional scale is information of local data on the ground. Where are the fences? Where are the guardrails? Where are you all seeing the wildlife moving in your communities and using some of these natural corridors that exist to move from one large intact block of habitat to another? So we drew purple circles all over the map with the idea that the connectivity science gets us so far, but we really need to understand on a local scale what community members are seeing to understand where the most important connectivity points are.
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I wanted us to repeat back to you so I understand if I'm hearing this correctly. So within these orange areas here, you're saying that we need to preserve 50% of those orange areas to prevent a great climate impact. Okay. And then the purple areas are areas within those areas where there are significant habitat or
There's
animal.
the potential for connectivity.
Okay.
So those are the areas that the science suggests there should be. Likely there is existing natural habitat, right? Some sort of, whether it's forest or wetland or riparian corridor. And the data suggests wildlife should be able to move freely there, and therefore, there's seed dispersal and movement between these large blocks of forest.
Okay.
But we need to ground truth that to understand it, because we have roadways like 44,
right.
which are
and you don't know
huge
where their
impairments.
fence is, about
Exactly.
deer fence up,
Yeah.
things like that.
Exactly.
What is this? Why is there a black square around this?
That is the town of
That's
Washington.
the town of Washington. That's our shape.
That's us.
That's
Yeah,
us.
no, I thought that, but it seems like there's parts that are not included. No, that's
No,
the full
That should be
border.
your town boundary.
Okay.
That should be it.
Yep.
You should have that memorized, Leslie.
It's okay.
Every corner should be in your mind by now.
That's okay. I should have explained that one.
We just did our natural resource inventory last year.
I like it.
Well, because you've got like Tower Hill and
This-
Deep Hollow, and I thought that more of it was in Washington than I guess.
We only get a touch of it. It comes
And
in.
I thought all of Butts Hollow and all of that part of 343 was.
No.
It's interesting when you start.
So Chestnut Ridge is not, that corridor of 343 is not?
So the 343 is down here. It is
Most of it is there.
nearly all of 343.
Yeah,
It's just
is in
let-
it.
So Leslie, our roads do extend a lot further than we think they do.
No, I know, but I guess what to me, Butts Hollow goes all the way to that entire section, including like where, for example, it's now the DLC's headquarters. The Perkins property
Walbridge.
would not properly be in this here.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It's clear. It's
Maybe I'm
definitely
not
in
looking
there.
at this- I'm looking at this the wrong direction, because Boats Hollow goes all the way down.
Yeah, no.
Most of Butts Hollow is.
So
is
Wal-
in
Oh,
Wal-
Hammond Hill, I see.
Yeah,
where it's going.
yeah, do you
But-
see,
But where it meets 343.
well, do you see Killern Road and all of that?
To the left.
Oh, and
of the
Chestnut
blue
Ridge.
line.
Okay, I'm actually turned around.
So one of the other things that may also help you on
No,
the,
I'm looking at it. I was looking at it.
oh, that's okay. But we also have an interactive map.
I know.
So on followtheforest.org, we have all sorts of interactive maps where you can type in addresses or zoom around and really like get a feel for where you fit within the landscape, which I think is one of the other really important parts of the work that we do is really getting people to see where we fit within these natural lands, right? Whether you're talking about where are the watershed boundaries and where is the water flowing, or whether you're talking about where are the remaining large blocks of forest within our town, and what has the work been to protect those forests, and what does that look like? You had a
Yeah, I
question.
had a sort of an ancillary question. Several years ago, maybe even more than that, I was driving back from Sharon, Connecticut,
Mhm.
into Amenia, and I saw a mountain lion. I know it was a mountain lion.
Yeah,
And I looked it up, and there's a corridor that runs all the way up there.
Yeah.
Is that something that you folks are involved with, protecting that corridor? So the
Yes.
Wildlife corridor?
yes. Mountain lion are not the primary species I think of or often talk about when I think about the conservation and connectivity work that we do, because more often than not, they're passing through our landscape, but they absolutely do. There was one that was hit on the Merritt Parkway in Connecticut a few years ago. Yeah. I often also,
There's actually a lot of them in this area.
Yeah.
Near me, there's a bobcat bin.
yes.
And I'm on a road that has a lot of contiguous forest that's
Yeah.
recommended in the town center to protect.
And bobcats
But
are,
it's not.
yeah, and bobcats are one that are coming back to our landscape because of, yeah, we've seen so many in recent years, bobcats, black bear, there are all of these
But
large
this was a mountain
species.
lion.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Relatively rare, I believe.
Yes, that was a lucky sighting for sure. But the other big species I like to think about too are moose, which are one that we tend to think of less in our southern landscapes, but they absolutely also pass through. And what's fun and exciting to think about these larger species is that's when you start to get highway departments interested, because there's a lot more risk to humans with these large species than when I start talking about salamanders. Like, that's exciting to me, but it's not necessarily as exciting to someone where safety along with the road salt is the primary concern. So
what do you do on Washington here? But for example, we have moose, she knows more about it than I do, IES. That's a big, large piece of land, and it's open habitat, and it's not built up. And we have bears and moose and so on there occasionally. Do you get involved with them, or do you stop where the mountain break is?
No, we think larger than our watershed boundaries. We often partner with folks. So my answer is slightly complicated because we are always working in partnership with people, whether that's town conservation advisory councils or whether that's the Duchess Land Conservancy or other conservation organizations working in this space. And so some of it's about thinking strategically about the landscape and where all of these different organizations fit within those roles, who's doing what within that space, what's missing, how can we all better work together to advance the goals that overlap between all of us. Sometimes it's about interfacing with highway departments and departments of transportation to really start thinking about what are the solutions that we need to ensure there's connectivity across the Taconic State Parkway or Interstate 84. And sometimes it's about thinking about what are the funding resources that aren't already here that we need to advance meaningful conservation or meaningful connectivity within our landscapes. So we sort of fall within a bunch of different buckets. And I also don't want to take too much more time of your agenda, but I sort of leave this here as a thought nugget. We're always happy to think further about how we can all work together and bring you all into the conversation.
Not for me, but for other people involved here. I'm going to talk about money, basically. Can the town of Washington in some way get involved with you and get some grants or other things?
I'm so happy you asked. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Highlands Conservation Act, but this is a source of federal funding for land conservation. And at some point, you may have had outreach from the Hudson Highlands Land Trust and an individual named Ted Warren, who coordinates their public policy work. And I will absolutely be happy to connect you with him if you haven't heard from him. But the Highlands Conservation Act is a phenomenal source of federal funding. It is limited to 4 states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. And up until the end of 2022, it was limited to the existing Highlands region, which stopped at the Pauling-Dover line, but then took this big jut north into the northwest corner of Connecticut, up into Sharon and Salisbury. In 2022, the act was reauthorized with a few new provisions, which also allows us to expand that boundary and add new towns, which would then make the town of Washington eligible for Highlands Conservation Act funds. Towns have to indicate their interest, which is essentially a resolution passed by the town board to say we want to be part of the Highlands region. And then that starts that process of being eligible for federal funds for conservation in what is federal funds can be really complicated for land conservation, and the Highlands Conservation Act is one that is fairly simple in the way that federal funds go.
So this is again, not for me, we have other people who are better at it than I am. How do you get in touch with you? I said if the board or somebody wants to.
Madeline has our contact info. I can also leave you all my card, and you all also
Our
have.
contact information is on the back of that packet that I handed
Eric
out.
came so prepared.
I have.
As well as
Right here.
QR codes to all of the
Yeah.
websites that we've mentioned.
Yep.
Okay,
So
Yeah,
I have
well,
another question. You said that you work closely with the
I am.
DLC. Is the DLC aware of these forest areas?
Yes.
And are they doing any kind of outreach with the landowners or that have these properties about that?
I can't answer your follow-up question.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, how are they working with you on it?
So we work collaboratively in a group of conservation organizations, really thinking strategically about the landscape. So sometimes that comes down to working with individual property owners together. We worked on a project in which HVA was instrumental in bringing funds to a conservation project that DLC was holding the conservation easement on that. So sometimes, again, it's a matter of sort of like filling in the puzzle pieces. What do you need to complete this project? Sometimes it's thinking strategically about the landscape to look at where the gaps are. It really depends on those sort of individual towns and individual project level questions.
Great, thank you.
We talk to them pretty often. Yes, also, yes.
Yeah, I just don't think that there's a lot of understanding around, we're looking, we don't have a forestry law in the town right now, and we're looking at that, and so it makes sense to me to have, having people understand this or figuring out how we can.
It's a really good question.
To legislate that.
The DLC is not as proactive as one would think in terms of, they wait for landowners, that's my understanding, to come to them. And I've been through the process with neighboring properties that have done that. And that was always the question, is how proactive are they to do it? Because it's a great question, because.
Well, I will say, if you look
landowners.
at maps of Connecticut and New York right next to each other, which I often do because we're thinking about looking across the watershed, there's a lot more forest conservation in Connecticut than there is in this part of New York. And that all really stems back to funding and the way funding has historically worked within New York State there's phenomenal agricultural programs for agricultural conservation around here. And it's been historically a little more challenging to tap into forest conservation resources. And there's been some changes at the state level that are resulting in more funds for forest conservation that's making it a little bit easier.
But when you say that, do you mean in terms of getting a tax exemption?
No, I mean funding for a land trust to purchase either a conservation easement or fee title to a property and then having it be permanently
So there's
protected.
more money for that where it's farmland, you're saying?
Historically, there has
opposed to
been, yes,
whether
in
it's
this region.
forest.
Yeah, so that's, like if you go on our maps and you're like, wow, why is this the way it is? Part of it has to do with state level funding and how the two states have operated differently.
Well, my scientist friend that I have that works in the Republic and in Connecticut always says that there's a lack of conservation culture over on this side for some in New York, which is quite what people think. And Connecticut is much more conservation oriented. I see that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I don't know why that is, but I don't know what, and also New York's bureaucracy is, I think, a lot more complicated, so that might slow it up.
And it's so much of a bigger state too, right? Like
Yeah,
you look at just the land mass that we're dealing with
yeah,
between Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York is huge. To
Right,
be able
right,
to
that's
allocate resources across the whole state is a totally different story than Connecticut or Massachusetts.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I have some questions clarifying the map process. So this map, how are you defining protected land?
So protected lands is sourced from the New York Protected Areas database. So, and that includes both conservation easements and lands held in fee by a conservation organization. So that would be like a land trust. It could be the state of New York State Parks or DEC. The New York Protected Areas database is a voluntary, you submit your information. So you're likely thinking of easements that you know exist that may not be on the map. The data that we utilized to aggregate the protected lands within the core forest does include protected lands that you're not seeing on that map. Some folks don't like to have their information displayed publicly, so I don't put everything on the maps.
And the process for circling
Mhm.
areas of connectivity or visual, you went through and you said, here's an area where.
So we started with two pieces of connectivity data. The Nature Conservancy has a really phenomenal regional connectivity data set. And then the University of Massachusetts recently developed a new connectivity data set that is based in upland forest connectivity. And that came out of Scott Jackson's lab. It's a really phenomenal data set that I'd be happy to connect you to. And so we looked at those data sets and where they intersect with core forests and the roadways and drew circles on the map.
Okay, and so you are seeking folks to help fill in the ground truth for those?
And I would be happy, like I said, I would be happy to set up another time to do, we call it a wildlife linkage assessment training. And we walk through, we have this simple form. You all are probably far more qualified to do this, and you don't necessarily need me to train you, but I'd be happy to. And it's essentially, you look at the roadway and the conditions on either side of the road and collect some data for us and submit it on an online form that you can find on the Follow the Forest website. Yeah. And the idea is we've done that exercise with basically middle schoolers all the way up to take your pick of any land trust volunteer. And the idea is you don't need a scientific background to collect this data. You can be a middle schooler who lives in the community and give us really good data that helps to inform connectivity science on the ground. Cool. Awesome.
And the 50% protection goal, is that HVA? Like, is that your goal? Is that a broader goal? And is it assessed per patch? Or is it also kind of weighted for the, right, there's a bunch of patches, there's different connectivity.
And it's a goal we put out there. In many ways, it's based on E.O. Wilson's concept of half Earth. I think we can get into a lot of nuances about it, right? If you look at the corridor, there's a primary corridor, there's secondary, and there's tertiary corridors. And you could argue at different scales, different patches have different importance. But I like to start with the concept of what would it take to get all of these to 50%? Maybe one core really needs to be a lot higher than that, and another core maybe is less relevant to the whole corridor. And I like to think of it that way because conservation isn't the only thing our communities need, right? So many of our communities we have affordable housing needs, we have needs for renewable energy. And so we have to think about it in a holistic perspective without just saying, we're going to conserve every piece of land within every town. And so I like to think of that as sort of a starting point and then a place to think about what else fits within this puzzle. Cool. Thank you.
So the QR codes on the back of
Yep.
that stapled packet are to the HVA website, the Follow the Forest website, with the interactive map that Julia mentioned, and also to the 10 Mile River Watershed Management Plan. I have a physical copy that I'll leave here with you.
Great, thank you.
Very impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was great to
Yes,
meet you all.
thank you. Very nice.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for coming out, and we'll be in
Give
touch.
this to you now.
Thank you so much. Please, please.
Yeah. please do.
Definitely.
Oh, we have a ribbon cutting.
for something.
The ribbon cutting, May 17th.
17th.
Yes. I should have mentioned that. So we have, I have a volunteer event coming up this Friday from 1 to 3. And that's, I'll do like a walk around the rain gardens and explain what they are, how they work, why they're there. And then it's also like a trash cleanup and an invasive species removal. And then a week after that, we have a ribbon cutting for the rain gardens and for interpretive signage that we're
And
putting
that's
in.
what you sent out here.
I did, yes.
Did anybody else respond to that?
I don't think I have everyone's emails, but in
But I
future I
think-
can.
I thought it was
I think we
forwarded.
got it and forwarded.
Yeah, I got it forwarded.
I think we forwarded.
I definitely
I'm
sent
away.
it.
Yeah,
To you.
no,
I'm
no.
away.
That's why I
I'm
think I
away too.
forwarded.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
We can talk about rain gardens anytime. Just say the word.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very nice.
Safe travels back.
Thank you. And feel free to reach
We
out
will.
for any reason.
We will. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You did fabulous work.
You too.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Round 2 now.
That's pretty impressive.
Yes,
What a resource.
love it. I know, I love it.
Very impressive.
All right, so we just need to approve the minutes from March 6th since we weren't here for April 3rd.
So I had some comments that I circulated.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically typos.
Okay,
So I circulated them back
yeah,
in March.
yeah. Which may have been corrected.
I remember seeing them through the email and saying, looked good after that.
Yeah, I think so. So
So I guess I'll make sure that Lisa has got.
the corrected, yeah, if you could
version.
do that. So a motion to approve the typo corrections
Yeah.
minutes. So motion for that?
Motion to approve the minutes as corrected with typos corrected.
From Pam, second. Howard, all in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful, thank you. So then, at the same time, I put down in new business, but at the same time, I'm gonna do it right now. To approve our draft letters, we had 2, I believe. We had the one to the planning board regarding the Mappetsville Hamlet mixed use.
So, yeah, I wasn't sure if what happened with that, because that was, we weren't sure whether or not that was even a valid point.
It is a valid point.
Okay.
So I,
And I drafted it so that, you could, it was contingent upon a certain reading.
Right.
And if the reading was wrong, then the letter went away.
right, so the letter stands. So we just need to
Okay.
base the approval on it. So what it is, which I believe it still sits under this exact, we may need to change actually. Because of the updated zoning code from
Mhm.
1999
Right.
in section 313.
I
I didn't write it down. It's D. I think it goes down to D now.
Uh-huh.
And they have the wording where it's got an exception, and that exception is those buildings that are mixed use, that were in existence either legally or legal non-conforming. They can reduce the residential space in them through that, it should be D, I think.
Yeah, it's here.
And it's, the only thing is it still has to go through planning approval and a special use permit. It cannot, you cannot just convert it without, you can't randomly say, oh, I'm gonna
Right,
switch
and,
the-
and it says that indeed, that you need,
You need
yeah,
the,
you
correct, so
need
it
a
has
special
to
permit.
meet, yeah, so it needs, so I think that's what our letter states, right?
Yeah, it does.
Right, so that we were just making sure that we're stating
Okay.
the correct thing.
Now, at the planning board meeting the other night, I don't know if the Zoom is up yet, it wasn't up this morning, or maybe it was after the Zoom. Susan Meany said, no, maybe we need to get a fresh legal opinion on it, on that section.
Which is fair, because it's ambiguous.
Yeah, everybody said it was ambiguous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so then our letter isn't wrong.
no,
Okay. So then
yeah, I mean, so it depends on how it's read, but
Right.
it really needs, so there's, I think we came up with 5, maybe 6 properties in Mabbittsville that
Mhm.
this pertains to. And it just needs to be clarified.
clarified. Okay.
All right,
All
so
right.
motion to approve that.
This is the, it's the,
Mabbittsville Planning Board code, 50%,
it's mixed use.
mixed use 50% ruling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
all right, so motion to approve,
Motion to approve.
Pam, second. Howard, all in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful, we'll get that approved and get them
A final.
a final copy. The second one is the CAC's letter for the hospitality district, which we gave to the town board as a draft. We just need to approve that.
Any further comments?
Did anyone have any further comments? Agreed with it? Okay with it?
It was interesting that the planning board's letter focused on the same section that we did
Yeah.
as a need for clarification.
Yes.
So they read it differently. They
Yeah.
said it should be factors, not requirements. We said requirements, not factors. So
Right.
I imagine that they'll come to some revision
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Yeah. Motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Did you catch it? You were the one, she was the, all, aye?
Aye.
All right, so done. Got those out of the way.
So I will finalize them tonight or tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning will be fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Now going to, you can take this if you'd like. To the NRI and the CSC update. We have the final maps, the final NRI book.
It's so impressive.
It is amazing.
Another round of applause.
I'm like, when I saw this, Leslie, thank you so much. When I saw this
Oh,
in
you're
my,
very
The rest of us get copies?
no, you don't get one, but you
Oh,
can,
yeah.
you don't get a copy, but you can play with it and read it and take it home. This is the CAC's copy. So-
There are 2 copies in town.
Yeah, so you can
look at-
review
and
the
actually,
copies.
It's all on, it's on.
It is on, it,
Well, I don't know if it's online.
if it's not online, it shortly will be. We're
getting
trying
it-
to
getting
correct.
it there.
So that's part of what we're trying to correct the NRI webpage now. So it's now going to change all of the stuff from our workings and we'll turn it into the point of the NRI, how it benefits the town and its residents, and the PDF of the book and the maps.
Right, and the maps, hard, big, beautiful copies of the maps are available.
Are we getting those framed up or putting on the wall or
No,
anything?
they're there like as a reference map. If
Yeah, because
anyone needs to do a deeper dive, or
Yeah.
any committee needs to look at it. I think there are
I didn't know if we,
copies
yeah,
that
of
were
each.
picked up by Jen Glasson and given to the
Okay.
clerk and are being
So we have those now
But
available
those
to
are-
everyone.
Yeah, but so just for some other information, and this has been a longer process, but we contracted with a company called E-Code
Yes.
18 months ago, right? And so this Friday, I'm giving them final kind of comments, not on any of the kind of new discussion points that we had in the task force, but things. So what happened is Mary, Alex, and their in-house counsel that E-Code has went through typos and found places within our code where areas were inconsistent. Like you say, in this section, this, it's this, it should be this, right? So they did all of that work, and we didn't know that that had happened. Meaning, the clerk and the town board did not know that that had taken place until they had we knew that she was doing a contract with them, we didn't know they had done any reviews yet. And that was not relayed before Mary had left, so we subsequently had a call with Mary to kind of get some background, and then I had some meetings since then with the guy from General Code. I asked ACARF and Vanderwater to look through it and see what have they already changed that was on the list of things that
We were changing.
that we were needing
Yeah.
to change. Could be a typo, could be inconsistency, could be a word that wasn't used. That's not getting into sort of the deeper dive question marks of things that are not clear in the code. Does that make any sense?
Mhm.
So, what's not clear in the code and what's still missing, there's a timeline that E-code needs to get things from towns before you trigger a new contract. So what I've decided is that, and I'm gonna discuss it with the town board tomorrow night, what I think makes the most sense is to have them do what's already been done and is done, that's mostly typos and inconsistencies, that was already flagged by Mary and their council, have that changed or fixed so that we can get it online. In the meantime, like the forestry thing and 25%, things that are gonna require more of a conversation, we need to start working on those, but not have that process delay having that access, because they're gonna take our NRI as well and those maps and put that on. They're like put everything online so you can search.
And it's so wonderful, but other towns have it, and it's just
Yes,
so.
it's incredible. The fact that
Yeah.
we haven't had it is
Yeah.
I just wanna get it up
I
so that
agree.
people
I know.
can use
It's
it, and then we
wonderful.
can, the things that are kind of more sticky in terms of, even like I was at the planning board meeting last night over the conversation around Mabbittsville. There, you have 3 lawyers that are or 2, you've got Emily Abrams who's practicing real estate law, you've got Susan Meany, you've got Vanderwater, and everybody is like, this is not, this contradicts with this. I mean, it's a very difficult,
Right.
in that code, part of the code. So there's part of the code parts that really.
Yeah, there are several parts in the code that
Like
negate,
that
they negate each other.
25%,
They totally do that,
It's really
and
confusing, but it's not gonna be solved
yeah,
it has to be solved by, according to the E-code person and Vanderwater, by like an actual conversation with the board about what do you, that's more of a
how is it
policy
gonna, correct,
conversation than it is
yeah, correct.
a cleanup,
It's not
kind
an
of
edit.
copy. Exactly.
It's not editing,
Exactly.
it's clarifying the code.
And then the forestry thing was really interesting to me because of that 50% and, I don't know if that could be part of it. I don't know how other places
Yeah.
legislate that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's part of those protected environmental protection
Yeah.
zones, right? And
Yeah.
implementing those.
Right, when you,
In the code somehow.
yeah, well, that's a different, so that usually.
Which is another conversation that we
Yeah.
had this week.
That has to do with the water, so there's that's at least my understanding, I don't, or like a very sensitive habitat, I don't think you
Right.
could say like every single one of these
Mm-mm.
people's forests
Yeah.
or whatever are EPA zones, but I think there's a qualifier for it, I think.
There are probably
But-
several.
But around the village's aquifer, the upper part is part of a protection zone. It's actually the only protection zone that I think
And
exists.
where
in
is
the town.
that?
It's in Mabbittsville.
Yeah,
That's the upper part.
Under the gas station.
Yeah.
Basically, like around there, it's across the street, kind of by the Johnson property. It's in that part of 44.
yeah,
But the perimeter of where the water feeds into that aquifer, that's the aquifer that links to the village's.
yeah, that's
water
village's water.
system.
Correct.
And that,
Mm-hmm.
that entire area is not protected, like the
Right.
upper part is, but the
Right.
lower part, which goes across 44, kind of by Home Free, back by Little Rest, back by Butts Hollow.
Wall-
it-
and
it-
Wall-
It
Wall
spreads
Bridge.
that whole
Yeah.
section, that isn't, and that very clearly should be, because the
Yes.
same map lines,
Correct. Because
exist at the top, so
Yeah.
that's something.
which are,
I think
that-
that's
which
what
is, Which is what our NRI showed us.
Yes, exactly. That's
And
what
the
those maps show.
2015 comp plan, we talked about that during, the midfield things. Those were.
That is-
The
that is-
2015 comp plans that protect your.
But what's interesting about that is that that whole exercise around that particular question of like, was it above the aquifer or all that? These maps, the NRI map shows that it actually
Is,
is
it's the
very
100%.
clearly,
Yeah.
but we.
There is no question.
Oh, you mean McDonald?
But the town did not have the same maps that the village had, and now we all see, we're all.
Everybody's on the same
speaking out
page.
of the- Yeah,
Why don't they have the same map?
they do now.
They do now, they just
They
didn't in the
They didn't
past.
before.
In the
I
past,
don't
they
know.
didn't.
I don't know who,
Oh,
one of us did.
That map was made, I was on the village water committee when that map
Yeah.
was made, and we gave it to them.
Yeah, but
Well, for whatever reason.
There were 3 different maps
Yeah.
that turned up in the NRI.
yes.
So.
I'm talking about the one that has the primary, secondary, and tertiary aquifers for the
Yeah.
village,
People know.
and it's a big circle, like a roughly drawn circle.
It's
Is
been
that the
updated.
one that we're
Yeah,
talking
it's
about?
been, updated now, that we have all of it in there.
It goes down to,
Well, they're gonna be on, they're gonna
Faith
be on.
School
the-
for boys down there, and it goes down to
And then
the
you can
other
click on it and you
school,
can
the
enlarge
state
it
top
instead
school,
of
whatever they
post
call
it,
it,
if
on
you want a big
343.
copy. They're gonna be the same
Yeah.
copies. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
That's why Eco is
We
so
gave them that map, I know that.
great.
Yeah.
I just have to, I actually print it all out so I can just
Make big ones.
do it on the
Just
train.
not
No, there's about
consistent.
24 of them. There's
Oh,
a
wow.
lot of them. It's not like you could,
No, yeah.
Oh,
you could
okay.
just do, it's not like 2 maps.
Those
It's a
are,
lot.
those are the ones that are in the NRI.
Those are
24.
the NRI ones. And I don't know, how many would you say? 20? I mean, a
Yeah.
lot.
20
Or
Yeah.
ish.
20-ish.
A lot.
That's why people have GIS. I love this town with GIS experts.
That's what-
They have
that's-
mappers on staff.
Well, these maps though, they're gonna, it's gonna be incredible once they're on whatever
Line,
this
yeah.
service is, because then you can see everything layered on top
that's
and
great.
it's gonna be great.
And you can actually do all this now yourself. Everyone
They're
can.
connected to the county ones. They're all like coordinated.
Mhm.
That's what
Yeah.
those maps are. Those maps.
They are now.
actual hard copy. It is, all of that coordination is done by.
That's what they did last year. That's why we had to wait for our NRA so that they could get that all done. All right, and
I
then
think
the,
it's supposed to, just let me interrupt. a
Oh, yeah,
moment.
go
It's
ahead.
supposed to be a training session
Yeah.
someplace along the line at the Cornell Cooperative, how to do all that for
Yeah.
everybody. That's
Yeah,
coming up
anyone-
soon.
anyone can do it.
You have the date?
For the schedule.
Not in my head.
Because you know Sean Carroll left.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody else is in charge.
Caroline left too. We did-
Yeah, I know they both did. We did them in last year, apparently. I think they sent us the information of who's replaced them, but I forget. All right, moving on, the Climate Smart Community update. We haven't done anything recently. Leslie and I are going to meet with, what was her name, Leslie?
Anna,
And, no, is that who we were talking to today?
Anna or Ann, and I
Yeah.
don't remember her last name.
It was a hyphenated name.
I feel so bad.
from-
Was it Anne Marie? Anna?
No, it was Anne and something.
Just describe her position.
No, sorry.
No, it is Anna. Her name is Anna.
Thank you, Leslie. Today's been a long day.
Anna Harrod McGrew. And her job
Yes.
at Cornell is to assist municipalities in organizing all of their paperwork to upload it for certification.
Yeah.
And just to kind of give you advice about like, is this significant enough to actually get approved for points? So we have the grid of what we have done, what's still in the process. We just are installing a compost toilet at the rec camp, which is great. The town got a grant for that a couple of years ago, and it was just discovered and is now being used, which is all great. But that's something that we can get. So there's, there might be other points that we can find to get that bronze certification, but she's great. And then we're introducing her to Natalie Thorpe, who does the social media or the Facebook for the town
And
and posts things on the website.
Yeah.
And Cornell is providing municipalities with social media postings that are already completed on disaster preparedness.
And
Like
we'll
things
just
around
upload it.
flooding,
They
climate,
do the work. we
warming,
upload
cooling
it.
centers, any kind of invasive species, like there are those moths that are going around, that could be something that they send out notifications about. So they're gonna, it's great, because Cornell's gonna produce the content
That's awesome.
for the town, so that all the town has to do is post it, which is great.
Which is great.
It's all social media.
It's all social media. Oh, well,
Well,
no, actually,
no.
no, part of what we're asked to do is also, partner with them to create a page on the website for
Yeah.
disaster preparedness, so that whatever's posted, whatever, you'll have like, latest updates. It's almost like a weekly newsletter, or
Yeah.
monthly, depending on what's out there.
Yeah.
It's really good.
But they're doing it all for us.
Yeah.
By the way, I got a thing from Chris Drago, who's a friend who's a Dutchess County legislator, and apparently Cornell is having a funding issue. Do you know about
That
this?
seems to
Shannon?
be, that's certainly.
No, I heard.
Shannon, do you know about that?
I didn't hear what you said.
No, but the departures certainly.
Sure,
suggest
it's, yeah, it makes it
there's been
sound
some
like it.
challenges, but I hadn't heard anything other
Yeah.
than the debacle over master gardening.
Yeah, that seems.
A bunch of them
seems to be falling.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, their
county wasn't providing.
Right,
funding
that's
for it.
exactly right. That's exactly right.
Hmm.
So we have to lobby Deirdre.
Yeah, well, I have to learn more about it, but that would be, because the way that, part of how Cornell, I mean, they will go to the state, like, for example, with them working with us, the same thing what they did with the NRI, right? They get state funding to help support municipalities.
Mhm.
Without that guidance, for example, what they did for us with the NRI, I mean, it was, I don't even know what that would have cost us to have to
I know.
hire,
I know.
people that have, understand maps and water, and all of it was really incredible, and they're gonna do it again for us for the CIC stuff, and this group, so they're a great resource. People should know
They're a great resource.
Yeah.
about that if Cornell is not getting support that it needs.
I
'cause
know.
It's an invaluable resource for our town, I would say. It's been a great, we're working with them.
It's
So
awesome.
is
Great.
it, so is it the
20 years.
Dutchess County Legislature? Should we be reaching out to Deirdre?
Yeah, I mean, that's what, I think it's, the budget's already been approved. Let me just find out more from Chris on it. I just saw it yesterday.
DC, I mean, there've been a lot of shifts in policy toward environmental protection.
Yeah,
That-
at the national.
But in New York,
Or
it
in
just
New York,
doesn't
in
make
the
sense,
state,
because New York,
and it's all competing for the same.
Yeah,
let's ask him.
all right.
See if it was on his.
Well, we'll
Interesting.
finish with first. I'm not
Back
sure.
and it'd just be some reorganization.
Yeah, the way that
Okay.
it's structuring themselves.
It was a while.
Yeah,
but I-
but that's entirely,
I
that
know
makes
that.
sense.
It could be,
Yeah.
it could be a restructuring.
Yeah.
We will keep an eye on that.
Feels like
Okay.
a reduction for sure.
And then, if we need to, we'll legislate to our Deirdre. Yeah, to our Deirdre.
So that's more of a follow-up.
Yeah,
to-
follow
To see if it's really
to see if
necessary.
it's something we need to do. We won't
Yeah.
jump on it yet.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next steps with our NRI maps and adoption. I think we've kind of covered that way that it's being used
Yeah,
and
which is
everything. I
terrific.
think we're fine. I think everything's come a long way and going there, right?
And the maps are here in the town.
The
hall.
maps are here in the town hall for businesses, residents, boards. Love it. All right, beautiful.
So people have to come in and ask for them and then fill them out.
And got that done. Well, Howard, it's you.
Well, I'll try to be very brief.
Be
even-
really
even
brief.
Briefer than usual.
Be briefer than usual. Thank you. You're our hero.
Yeah. The main thing that happened, there's two things that are happening, is that the planning board is now deciding that they can skip sections of the review process, like cancel public hearings on applications. This is something new. So, for example, we had a lot line change. I was at the meeting and they decided, well, we don't need to have a public hearing on that. So this is a new innovation. That's one thing. ZBA has done the same thing basically with some of the projects coming. Of course, not all the projects involve us directly, but this is a new thing where they've decided to skip sections that were always part of the steps. And personally, I'd like to see those steps followed, but I'm not the one making those decisions because they've worked pretty well for a long time. What did affect us was there was one property that had a water body 150 feet away, but it was down slope from the project. And they decided, a little bit of coaching, that they had to have a silt fence put in, because that's an environmental protection of that body of water, even though it was outside, technically outside the 100-foot boundary. So that was a nice thing. And the rest of them just involved the usual stuff, quote unquote, where people got variances from the code. So, and that's what happened. The only other thing that I would like to comment on, I'm a little upset about, is the planning board's letter, where they've taken the exact opposite state course of recommendations than we did. They recommended adaptive reuse for some reason, and even though the hospitality zones are technically commercial projects in the town, the 2015 comprehensive plan and even the 1989 one, I spent a good deal of time trying to make sure the town remained rural or agricultural, a place where people could live without commercial development in the town. And they specifically specified the village to be the zone of commercial, with the exception of Mabusville, which is that other problem that's coming up. So these hospitality zones that we're looking at, and the planning board commented on, are all in the town. And it's technically the beginning of expansion of commercial zoning in the town. And the planning board recommended that this adaptive reuse.
So this is their first substantive paragraph here.
Yeah, it's on the second paragraph, I think, in there.
Yeah.
And they said that you could take this adaptive reuse and make it larger. You could outside the original things that if you have to reuse the project, it has to be in the original footprint of the building that we're talking about. And they say you can expand it outside the original footprint in order to get to 40 rooms with an accessory use. And that's not what was agreed to originally. It's not what was agreed to in the person who reviewed I forgot his name, but they hired a person to review everything. And his recommendations were similar to ours, that this can only be 3, and any development or rooms must be built in the original footprint. Planning board disregards that. I don't know, and CAC did not do that. We said we want environmentally that you have to be careful, and it has to be within the original footprint, and you may enlarge somewhat in the back. That's a little vague, by the way. This thing in the backyard that you can build in it. The zoning code itself says something about you can only enlarge, I think it's 10% in the backyard area. There's a number in there somewhere. And they're recommending that none of that stuff is going to count. And that as long as you're saving, reusing buildings, that was their concern. That if you have an existing older building, these people are going to tear it down and build something modern. This will give them an incentive to save that building. But the question is, at what expense are you saving that building? How much of a large structure do you want to be in that neighborhood?
I agree with Howard, and I had forgotten this when we talked about the letter. When we saw their letter, I had thought maybe we should, and could we, even though we'd already approved it and submitted a draft, update our letter to recommend not changing based on the planning board's open-ended.
Yeah.
Yes.
Give leniency to anyone doing adaptive reuse.
Yeah, and again, that goes back to the fact that 2 of the 3 zones are in environmentally sensitive areas. I think, I would care a lot less about a building expansion if we weren't talking about problems anyway, and 2 of the 3.
And it may be that there's a logical and environmentally sound reason for some existing buildings to want to add 2 or 3 more rooms, but the wording recommended was very open-ended
And it was
and seemed to
purposely.
allow to get up to 40
Yeah,
potentially,
potentially.
which is in many of these cases building 3 times the size of the building that's currently there.
Tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, this is dangerous. This also is setting the groundwork a little further into the future for more commercial development in the town. But it's sort of putting in, you're opening the door, so to speak, for commercial development now. Who knows what the next board is going to do with the board after that? And
That's exactly right. So, you know,
Well,
and
Can
again,
I just interject one second? Sorry, I don't want to speak because it's not my committee meeting, but Howard, you said that we had the 2015 comp plan and people only want development in the village. I think that's right as far as commercial development goes. And that is people's first choice for hospitality. The town, of course, has no jurisdiction over the legislation there. And currently the village does have legislation, a large part of it for 20 room-ins. The reason that it is, those areas that you just outlined are in fact areas that are kind of acceptable, is that we went through this process for 2 years to ask people where they wanted it. Currently now, they can make an application for a special use permit at either one of those locations without having the parameters that are put in place by having an overlay in 2 of those 3 locations.
the special use permits
I
are
also
limited
wanted
though.
to also point out, because I did talk to the lawyer about this, one of the comments in the CAC's letter was about the report suggesting 2 overlay locations and not 3. What the report suggests is a hospitality zone that goes from College Lane all the way to the monument. Because there are 2 houses there, it's on a slope, the other part was open. When we actually did do a walkthrough and site visit, said instead of having people get concerned about having a huge swath of land, this is empty space right across the street from where there already is 20 room zoning for inns, and Daytop was already in it. So we the other option is just to open the whole thing up and say there's 2, or have it bifurcated
split.
there and have it be split and be 3. So that's the thinking behind it.
that's helpful.
And-
It is helpful.
And
And maybe we'll update the letter to say that we understand that, that it's an alternate, having 2 there is an alternative to having 1.
having
but
one
One
much
larger-
larger,
one
much
yeah.
larger, yeah.
So,
The other thing too, I mean, you can certainly submit another letter. What Nan, having spoke to Nan, we reviewed the comments with Nan. We sent them to Nan and to Jim Stout's office. And Nan said, I think we should discuss them as we go through each seeker point to kind of understand it. So we did touch upon some of these issues when we were deciding the seeker piece. So anyway, if that's helpful, like that, you can look at that recording to kind of go through that, but that was the thinking about the zoning, those zones. And Nan also made a comment to me, she did review the Rhinebeck zoning and said in her view, it's virtually the same, just different language.
yeah, and I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It just, you need to update the language then to make it consistent, because there are enough discrepancies. I mean, I did have a phone call with Nan, and Nan said
Oh, right, I forgot, yeah.
that she thought that the language in the existing draft was strong, but if you actually pick it apart,
Yeah.
it's really not. So it's ambiguous. And so it would be, if it's really true that the intent is the same, then there's no reason not to update the language to make it a lot clearer. That's
Okay.
all.
Well, then maybe that's part of a bigger code conversation, I guess, from where I sit, then we're like changing the code or changing the law to, where in addition to introducing, do you see what I'm saying? You do,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting that we go back and change anything in the town of Washington zoning code. It
okay,
was only the language in the proposed amendments to that related to hospitality. It only update that language.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay, that's
so-
helpful.
So what I can do is make it clearer that the language from Rhinebeck was intended to be as an example, not to change our existing zoning code, but only to update what was the draft of our hospitality.
Okay, that's
So-
helpful for me to understand that, to share that with her, because she felt, and she felt that it was, that the language that we currently have is,
So maybe would it be more helpful to mark up our existing language to make it
yeah, show me what it, and I will, and then I'll take it back to Jim and to Nan just for consideration and see what they
Yeah.
think.
Because I think that would be, I didn't want to actually do a markup because I thought that might be less helpful, but it sounds like it would be
Yeah.
more helpful to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think as long
Yeah.
as it's not, if it's substantive and it becomes another conversation,
Well, it would be changes to the existing draft
right,
language.
Yeah.
That's all.
So what are we doing? I heard two someplace in this discussion. Did you mention instead of the number 3, just 2 zones? Well, I lost that part of it. I don't hear what.
So originally, it was 2. But the one was one long continuous piece. Now they separated the 2 because it was, some areas were not
it just seemed
in
like
that
that would
long
open up
piece.
a lot
It
of
would just open
concern of having a huge
Huge
section of that
from-
road being open to
hospitality, so you could put,
When we believed, based on the conversations that Nan shared, that the committee had and the community, it made sense. College Lane was put that demarcation going all the way out to 343 was there because of daytop, right? That was the reason why that made sense. And then
Yeah.
everything over there, because contiguous to the village was the other big part of what
Okay.
people wanted. And so that was what was suggested in the report, was College Lane to the monument. So that's a very big piece of land that goes all the way to that light.
But College Lane, are we talking about that little
No, I'm
piece of
talking
road that
about-
goes up?
Basically, daytop.
Daytop
Goes to daytop.
Daytop from-
That's a huge
Connecting
section.
both of
And
those.
I didn't
was
even read
our
it that way.
feeling, or
Okay.
Yeah.
was
I
our
see what
feeling
you're
that that
saying.
was
Yeah.
creating a very large overlay area that was not probably what was
Okay.
intended.
Yeah.
So
In terms
what, that's, I say, I don't hear any hearing aids, but what was the suggestion to do away with that and do what?
split it into 2.
No,
So
nothing was.
it wasn't suggested, it's just,
Daytop separate.
So they-
and South Village
they just-
separate.
they separated the
Not
daytop
contiguous.
piece.
Instead of just having
That's why you
one
got 3 zones.
huge.
So we were,
That's how they came with 3 zones instead of just 2. So it actually shrunk the actual space, and so it's just daytop and just close to
So
the
there's a
monument.
buffer in
There's
between.
a residential
two and
buffer.
South
It
that
was
you
actually
can't
just,
use.
I was
Okay.
just responding to the comment from the CAC that the town should only have 2, and we could certainly have 2, it would just be a massive,
It just would be a longer,
massive
bigger,
section,
Okay.
and that probably is not what
What anyone
what was
wants.
intended.
was intended.
On the
as
small
opposed
sections.
to-
Correct. And instead of making
This
all of,
creates a buffer feature.
It makes
Yeah.
the area there, which was vacant and across from an area that's already zoned for 20 linens, and then an area that already wasn't that in our minds, this was an area that the committee said would be a good place for hospitality because it's contiguous to the village. And because there was hospitality, it would be a much bigger, I guess what I'm saying is the town could certainly have 2 instead of 3, but the reason why it doesn't is because of the fact that it would just be a very large area, and that to me would open up much concern from a lot of us about having just a huge area that has many residential homes on it that's not direct, I mean, it is near the village, but it's not directly adjacent to the village as the current location is that already has that zoning for 20 units. if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the effect of having the 3 districts, though, doesn't that in effect mean that there could be 3 inns instead of 2, or not?
No, we actually really cleared up and was very specific about, no, yes, you could,
Yes.
you could.
I think it's yeah. One per,
It's what
so it allows for one more.
it what allows for one more. So
But
but that has to be balanced out with the idea of having a much larger zone. So,
And I would also say that right now, right across the street, we could, there's no limit on the number of 20 room inns.
got it. Okay.
So the perception of do you see?
Yeah,
you know,
it does.
It's a zoning consideration. It's not necessarily a fait accompli that is what is going to necessarily be there. Because right now you could have across the street
Several.
many with no limit on that number.
Okay.
That would just be.
All right.
Are we talking about the one by the monument now?
Yeah, the one
No,
by the
I'm saying
monument.
that, yeah, I'm saying that the current, if you look at the village's zoning, there's a big section right across from Bennett that goes all around here back that allows for a 20 room inn. Now, the village still would have all of their protections. You'd have to go and apply and do setbacks and septic assessments and water and all that stuff, the same that you would in that location. But their zoning says that right now. right
So we're
across the
talking
street.
about those boundaries, the ones that are on Route 343, those little houses? Is that what we're
No, I'm just
saying?
saying that area is included, including everything that that map goes from there all the way to where the fire department, it's a huge section that allows for 20 room inns in the village.
Oh, in the village.
In the
Yes,
village,
in the village.
yeah,
In the village.
20 room or 20 persons?
20 room,
20
Yeah.
room.
20 room.
But I'm just was discussing in my head and trying to follow what the planning board recommended. The village has their own code, and we really have nothing to say about that.
No,
No.
Yeah, I agree, no one's arguing
No.
that. I'm just,
she's just using it as a reference.
I was just using that, I was just trying to provide an example of the difference between something happening and having 3 rooms and actually just something being zoned for the possibility of something happening. And when that possibility exists, that applicant still has to go through
The
all
process.
of the
stuff.
different
All the codes.
codes.
And are we limiting it to one hotel quote in each of the zones that we have
Yes.
on the map?
Yes,
Okay.
one per zone,
One per zone still, okay.
right, and that was corrected from the original draft.
Yes, yeah, I saw
We
that.
got strong public, smart, very good feedback, and we took something and made it even more clear so that was very clear.
Okay, so the other thing is our difference with the planning board about adaptive reuse being allowed to expand on their memo. And we're saying adaptive reuse has to be within the footprint,
Yeah,
which makes a lot more sense because it will preserve the rural character, it will preserve the environment a little bit better, and so on. So we have 2 different recommendations to you, the town board.
And I don't think our drafts even specified that we recommended that because that was what the draft we responded to already
It is
said.
exactly.
So
Right.
do we need to respond?
Okay, good point.
Again, I haven't talked to the board about it, I did speak to the planning board about it and said very clearly that the goal of adaptive reuse is to adaptively reuse, it's not to expand.
It's not to be
upon what's
creative.
Already there, so I think that
It's not to be creative.
So maybe we don't need to say anything.
I don't think you do. I
Okay,
mean,
so
at this,
we're not going
that's
to.
not,
It's not,
Okay.
it's not for us right at this point.
Okay, I have a minor point when you're done with that. I'll go ahead. I mean, interruption. Go ahead.
and by the way, they appreciated that and
Interrupting you.
understood that, it wasn't, it was just, they were just,
Yeah,
Yeah, it's going to be easy to mark up section 9 to strengthen it. And to strengthen the environmental protections, and then the town board can, look at it, send it to Nan, and then decide what to do with it.
sounds good.
I
Thank you.
didn't want to be something.
Okay, now
No,
there's
it's
another
perfect.
minor
Easier.
thing. I
Mm.
won't go too long here.
Yeah,
The dark skies. Dark skies recommend generally 3,000 Kelvin. In other words, they want a dark, sort of yellowish blend. They changed 3,000 in their recommendation to
to
4,000.
4,000. I saw that
Which
as
is
well.
brighter.
Yeah, and
And that's not what you want in a rural town with a big hotel and bars and all that stuff there. You would prefer that if that not be so bright. And so our original recommendation and the dark sky recommendations also states 3,000. And people have been coming to the planning board and they've adapted the dark sky because it was brought up, maybe you should consider dark sky because the sections in the zoning code that sort of already indicate something like that. And they've said they agreed to do that.
See, this is what's confusing, is that it says dark sky compliant in one section and then 4,000 Kelvin
Kelvins
in
on the
another.
other.
In which section? In our section? Where are you?
No, no.
where are
Yeah,
you
in
getting
the
that
lighting, it says, in order to reduce unnecessary light pollution and trespass, all exterior lighting shall be dark sky compliant.
from? Yes.
But then it goes on to say, it is required that warmer color temperature, like i.e. below,
Below 4,000?
and that colder temperature light above 3,000 generally be avoided.
Okay.
So that colder temperatures above, is above, but warmer temperature below. So we
Okay,
want-
colder temperatures are brighter. The 4,000 is the
Yeah.
colder temperatures. It's
It-
opposite
it-
in
it-
logic.
It is required that warmer color temperature light,
Right.
i.e. below
4,000.
4,000 utilized, and
Yes.
that colder temperature light above 3,000 Kelvin generally be avoided.
Yes.
So,
okay, we're on the same
so
page.
it says that they are trying to avoid colder temperature light above 3,000.
They have a correction in there.
But then they changed it to.
They changed it to 4,000 in their correction.
The planning board. In
Planning board.
their
Oh,
letter,
the
in their
planning
letter,
board.
it said they
That's
changed
what I
it
was
to.
talking about,
They
the planning board
said
letter,
not 3,000, they said 4,000.
4,000. They
It
simply
did,
crossed
it
it
did
out.
say that.
So we
They
would like the
we'd like
planning
it-
board letter to be expunged.
Pretty much.
So should we add a sentence affirming
The
3,000
lighting.
Kelvin?
Yes.
The 3,000, nothing higher,
So your letter should say.
and dark sky.
Please don't listen to
And
the
dark
planning
sky
board.
compatible.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Ignore their letter. Okay.
and I believe that's something that we're trying to get changed in the zoning code anyway, with consistency of this is what the lighting's.
Yeah, it should be
Yes.
slightly. People are agreeing to it at the planning board section, so there's not really a problem with it.
Right.
But it's not specifically spelled out so clearly that somebody who doesn't know the zoning code and comes in for an application, so, oh yeah, that's it. But it's not like that,
Right,
Okay.
all right,
and it should be.
Well, if two
Exactly.
thresholds are confusing,
yes,
then one should err on the.
on the lower one.
Yes. Okay.
All right, anything else to report?
No,
Okay, well, thank you. You made it brief-ish. So hold on, gotta go into all my notes here.
Yeah, so are you then updating our letter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
She's-
update
She's
the
gonna
letter.
update the approved letter.
Yeah, so, for the 3 points we discussed.
And we approved the updated approved letter.
Yeah,
Again,
okay. So I'm gonna circulate a revised draft of the letter.
but it's approved
In
in advance.
advance,
Revised approved draft.
because we
Yep.
discussed all the revisions and approved the revisions at this meeting, so.
So, also, the slow-mo spring or no-mo May has gotten a lot of attention, I've seen. Yeah, in the village, there's people that got their areas,
In the town, there's a ton of, like.
yeah, there's, so I think the slow-mo spring is probably a little bit more pertinent to us because no-mo May seems to be we're full-blown here. Like we have, everything's blooming.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't
Out
understand.
of control already.
Correct, like, so I don't think there's any issues with the bees and the other. you know.
No, but April is now the month.
April is our month, so that's why I actually kind of got it loaded.
Serious, don't mow in April.
Don't mow, yeah. I had people mowing in April though, just so you know. I got some grief.
It'll be March next year.
Next year, the year after, it'll be March. All right. So anyway, so that's good to see. Lots of areas that are not being mowed yet. Also, Innisfree, I think I forwarded everybody the Innisfree Community Day. I will be away, unfortunately. No, I'm not actually for that one. That was not the one I'm hoping to go at 4:30 a.m. to visit, because that's when I'm awake. Alrighty, and
So we're not meeting in June?
no, we are. Did I change that? I did.
Yeah, you did.
Sorry. No, sorry. June 5th is our next meeting. I'm having a lot of trouble with me and my